give it like another minute. It's always funny, you can always tell like the more tech heavy sessions because everybody's way in the back.
What are you trying to say?
Oh, that's where I sit when I do this.
That's in case we have an important call, we can step out.
I didn't know if this lady was closing all the doors or what she was doing, but we're going to go ahead and get started. So we're going to be working on Microsoft Teams, looking at some templates that we've deployed in our schools. My name is Brian Merrill. I have a background as an elementary classroom teacher. I was a classroom teacher for about 15 years, then moved into a STEM teaching position, doing some embedded staff development, and I've been the educational technology analyst for the Central Bucks School District for about the last 4 years. So I handle all of our new integrations of educational systems, all our interoperability, some teacher training, our office environment, and a few other random pieces. So today the pieces I wanted to look through was why did we move to Teams from some more past collaboration tools, look at some templates, how do we use these at the elementary, middle, and high school levels for building principals to work with our teachers, and then what do we do to manage? So we'll look at some of the settings we have in the back end and how we manage our teams. So what is Teams, for those of you that are a little bit more unfamiliar? To me, it was the way that in Office 365 you had to go to all these different areas to see all your pieces, and we asked for years of, well, why can't I see this under one pane of glass? And that's what Teams has become. I can get to all of my Office 365 pieces under one pane. I don't have to leave that platform. It also has persistent one-to-one group chats, some online messaging. You can do voice and video calling, and then again, all those apps are built right in. All of your security and compliance settings that you have for your office environment exist within Teams. All of your IM messages are still within your security and compliance center. You can pull all of them up with the right level of admin. So it's a really good and secure tool. So we were a big OneNote district when OneNote came out. People got kind of OneNote happy. I don't know how many of you are from districts that use OneNote. There's a OneNote for everything, and more time is spent in a meeting saying, well, what OneNote is this in, than actually doing some collaborating. So issues included, like I said, having a million OneNotes. We also ran into issues where people were putting files in OneNotes and using it as a file repository, which OneNote isn't really built to be. So we ran into some syncing issues of trying to push just massive amounts of data up to the cloud and back down again. And we also had people trying to use that password protection for private sections within a notebook. And if you've tried to use password protection in OneNote, it's pretty clunky in terms of what version of OneNote allows you to password protect in what area, and then being able to unlock. We also were heavily users of district share drives, so using those network drives. Issues for us with those included managing that permission set. There's a lot of management from our IT department, not being able to have access from home, and then it really hindered us from being able to manage our devices in a modern way. We have our one-to-one devices are all deployed via Intune, and we've been wanting to move more of our staff devices to also being managed by Intune. We couldn't do that while still maintaining network drives. Because those Intune devices aren't joined to the domain, you can't give them network drive access. So since moving away, we've been able to start to co-manage those devices to be able to manage them a little bit more modern. Our other way of working via email, which I know we all get a million email messages. So issues included just too much of it, and then knowing, well, what's the most recent? If we're emailing documents back and forth, working on things collaboratively, well, how do I know that the one I have matches the one you're looking at? Or, well, I'm looking at the one from yesterday, you have the one from today, with, you know, a confusing piece there of email. So we decided to go with Microsoft Teams. So we had piloted Classroom when Classroom came out, and that clearly was not a ready for prime time product, built on top of groups. And it just didn't have the functionality I think that Microsoft wanted it to have. So they took some of the ideas of that product and really reimagined them into this Teams product. So the mindset that we took that really set us up for success was collaboration first, not file first. So we had people trying to set up these teams almost thinking of that file storage solution first. But really the way you need to look at it is who's collaborating with whom. Who needs the same access to be working on the same documents, the same workflows. So being able to do that really set us up to create our teams not just within our buildings, but then also within some of our business departments. You know, who were those groups of users within that greater piece that then need to collaborate, and that's how we set our channels. So if we thought about our building was our entire team. That's the group of people that needed to work together. And then those channels were those smaller subsets of that larger group. And again, we deployed that not just in our buildings, but also within our business departments, our HR, finance. And then what groups need to deliver information or collect information, because then those also became channels, right? So it's setting up logical places for people to go to be able to get or give information to other people. Because again, one of the things we're trying to get rid of is having to email pieces out. So if I as the office need to collect sign-ups for the book fair, instead of that being emailed to the building secretary, there's a channel that information would belong in. All right, so this became our elementary template. So Pine Run is one of our buildings. We had our general tab, which every team comes with, and then you can say we have our channels for our grade levels. So these would be places for our grade level teams to be able to collaborate. Right, so instead of 5th grade all emailing back and forth or back to school night PowerPoint, that PowerPoint can live in the files section of that 5th grade team. Right, we also had some other pieces that people needed to collaborate with for their school events, for reading. I think the Reading Olympics went in there. So really being able to collect and put out information. That was what this IST and child study area was for. So it's not just to being able to collaborate in real time, but also our IST folks need to be able to collect work samples and recommendations of students that need to enter that IST process. and this gave an area for those documents to be able to go. So that way it's not, we get to the IST meeting, again, we're looking through our email for all of Johnny's work samples, we can go into the IST channel and be able to go into those folders and where all that information just lives, right? So we're no longer hunting for information. We can go to where that information is always present. Middle school, we had to look at it a little bit differently because we have, and middle school had the most channels of what we have. And as you can see, if you look at it, it seems like a lot, right? And if you look at Microsoft's recommendations, they talk about between like 5 to 6 channels before it starts to get overwhelming. But the way we took that guidance was you should have 5 to 6 that are active for you, because you can hide channels, hide and show channels depending on what you want to see. And if I go back to, since elementary is my background, I wouldn't have all of the grade level channels showing for myself as a 5th grade teacher. I would have 5th grade showing and the rest would be hidden. So while it looks, when we're seeing all of the channels, like there's quite a few, if we really think about it from a user's perspective and how many they're seeing on a day-to-day basis, we can really whittle that down to within that 5 or 6 guidance. So for middle school, we did both academic team, which is these teams here. So this is like cross-curricular, right? That math, science, reading teacher that all teach on that same academic team, as well as channels that are based on academic area. So as a 7th grade math teacher that's on Team Spark, I might be showing this channel for my academic team for all the teachers that are teaching the same kids, and I'm also showing the math team where I can collaborate with all the math teachers in my building at once.
Are these all public channels, or do you have some of them set to private?
So when we get into the management piece, we'll talk about kind of the difference of how we manage some of these. When we initially set all of this up, public channels, private channels didn't exist at that time, so we've gone in and been able to add a couple pieces, really more for our building administrators to work within their office by themselves is really the only, that and some IST pieces are the only ones we've made private. And then high school was very similar, but that was easier because we just have to do channels based on academics, based on content area. So if you look at elementary and high school, they're kind of polar opposites because we have grade levels and then we have academic areas, where middle school is really the blend of both of those. We had to have both because of the nature of our middle schools. But again, we have our different areas here where we need to collect or distribute information, and then for each academic area, so those math teachers can all collaborate building-wide. So this was an example of some of those modern workflows. So the way that our child study referral worked in the past was either a Word document that got filled out and emailed into people, then you have to find and collect that Word document somehow, or in some cases it was an actual paper document that had to be filled out and then photocopied and brought to places. I don't find that either of those are very secure or very easily managed. So what we've been able to do because of deploying teams is make and I always like to start a form with an Excel document, because then that form will feed back to that Excel. You don't have to go back to forms again. So in the child study area in Lenape, which is one of those private channels, right? So only that child study team is able to get into that to see the results. We made an Excel document that's linked to a form. Put that form as one of the tabs at the top of that team for the building. So now any teacher can click on this tab, fill out this form, and it will populate the Excel document that lives inside that channel. So when we get together as an IST team, we don't have to search our email to find that document, find the paper document on the table, make sure everyone has copies. We can go right to the Excel as a team and get started right away talking about the students that need help. So this was just one example of a workflow that we were able to modernize because of deploying teams. Any questions about the template piece before we talk about how we manage some of this? So for management, we really looked at the membership permissions that any owner of a team can set, And these were the way that we set it at the beginning. We took away a lot of the membership permissions because as we know, when people first get new toys, they like to push all the buttons and see what they do, which can be difficult for a building administrator that has all their tabs set and their channels set and everything looks the way they want it, to then have kind of just a random teacher adding things or taking things away. So we don't have where members can change tabs or make channels. All of that is set at just the owner level. Other than members being able to delete their own messages or edit their messages, we felt that that was important to be able to go and take a message away or edit if you find a spelling mistake. This was one that we let building principals kind of decide of how they wanted to use that general channel. Do you want to use it as more of an announcements where only the owner can post permissions or post messages? Or did you want it more open where anyone in the team can post a message? But this was the screenshot that we sent to building administrators or showed them during our training about here's how you should set your team we set it as this when we made it with them, but then also this was in their documentation for if they needed to go and change for any reason. Some of our principals did have where members could add channels because as we deployed this, every building had 2 people from our digital transformation committee on site in the building to help them kind of talk through what should their channels be and all of that. So we also use a lot of permission folders. So one of the things that you can do in Teams that's really handy is you can look at that file storage out in the SharePoint view. And once you're out in SharePoint, you have all of the power and tools that you would have in a normal SharePoint environment. So where this became really handy for us was being able to permission spaces to certain people. For instance, again, this is prior to private channels being available. But what we're able to do here is this child study team at this particular building wanted a OneNote to be able to talk with their group and collaborate and have all those pieces in a OneNote. So what we did was build that OneNote inside a permission folder so that only that team can get to it, right? It then supersedes who is a member of the team, right? We also use this for our substitute folders in our building. We made it where certain people can only view that folder. So this was handy in a couple different scenarios. One, we had where the office needs to push documentation out to the rest of the building, things like building schedules, maps. The teachers needed access to those to be able to see the schedules, but we didn't want teachers to be able to change them. So using that SharePoint permissioning, we were able to change that folder from edit to read only so that teachers can get in there, get their schedules, download them if they need to, but they can't make any changes in that. We deployed that both for building maps and also for faculty meetings, so that a principal had a place where they could put articles and things for teachers to read, but they can't delete anything out of it. We also use this for our substitute folder. So again, this all supersedes what's in Teams. So what we did for our substitutes, at our schools there, they have a generic sub account that subs can use to be able to get in to a computer and be able to use Word and PowerPoint and all of that. So what we did was give them a read-only folder inside the Teams environment of each building. So that substitute account isn't a part of the team, right? They don't have access to everything that's in the team. They only have read-only access to that one folder. So now teachers are able to drag and drop their substitute plans right into the team, and the substitutes have a shortened URL that will take them just to this folder where they have read-only access to download those substitute plans. So it really solved this issue for teachers who were trying to email plans out to a sub or email them to a grade level partner to print. Now they're just in one spot, access through Teams, again with that shortened URL.
Could you go back to the slide before that where you said you would use that for articles for a faculty meeting or something like that? Now, when they would read those articles, could they comment on them? Could they? No.
No. So this is for read-only pieces at all. So any of that collaboration piece would exist on a separate document.
Okay.
So typically, if any kind of strategy, right? Like if I want you to read this article and then take slide 4 in a shared PowerPoint and put your thoughts on that, that collaboration would have to happen elsewhere. Yeah, but we had run into so many instances, and I'm sure you've seen this too, where someone accidentally deletes something, right? One of the trainings that I had with the principals, I had a principal decide, like, well, I don't need to see this fake team anymore, like the training's over, I don't need to see it, and deleted the team as a whole, because we had them all in as owners so they could see what being an owner was like. So I'm working with another principal at a table, and suddenly that team disappears. What just happened? But luckily, they can easily be brought back through the Exchange admin portal, which is kind of a weird way to bring back deleted teams, but that's where it is. So private channels brings a whole nother piece to it, where now, thankfully, you can take an entire channel and make it private. That makes the chat piece private, it makes everything private. So we've deployed that very infrequently. We had a couple places within our business department where really, and within our HR department, where it's only a couple people that really need to not only see documents, but also where they could use a place to chat and collaborate. We've kept a lot of our other pieces where it has those permission folders the same, because they're either channels where people needed to place information for others or take information from others. So that's the one piece to kind of keep in mind with the private channels, is that it's completely private. Nobody can get in. So if you're thinking about how do people collaborate or what are those workflows, if it's the type of channel where either someone needs to get or give information, I wouldn't make that channel private. I would utilize those permission folders in SharePoint to be able to be flexible. So the next piece, this is just showing the how I have our policy set, because of course when you roll a product out like this, there were concerns about student chat, student video chat. We had a little bit of an issue when we first rolled out our one-to-one, is that we still had Skype for Business, and boy, did kids find out pretty quickly that they could Skype chat one another all day, and they enjoyed doing that. So we really took a hard look at our team's policies and kind of how can we have this where it's open enough for collaboration, but closed enough where our other administrators felt comfortable. So this is how I have the meeting policy set for students, and you'll notice that at the top it says global. I have all of our global policies are set for student because we have 18,000 students and 2,000 staff, so it makes more sense to have your global policy encapsulate the majority of your users. So all of our global policies are set for that student piece. So in our meeting policy, I have everything set to off, completely all off. This is for sharing content. We have that PowerPoint sharing is on, whiteboard is on, everything else is off. So even if they are in, and I'll talk about the type of meeting that they can join, but they're not able to share their screen, which we thought was important because while we want teachers to be able to share their screen, and in some cases possibly a student, what we didn't want is for a student to be able to just share screen on their own without some kind of teacher intervention allowing that share to happen. And then our live event policy, we have where they cannot schedule a live event. And then messaging is all off. And then calling policy was interesting because they didn't have this one at first, and then their global had some of these defaulted to on. So one day, kids were just able to make calls within Teams, which took a little bit of a, what do you mean they can make calls in Teams? Everything's set to off. So we had to go back in because they introduced a new policy category. And then this is also available in the resources for the session. This is the PowerShell script we run to pull all of our teachers from that global policy to the teacher policy. So our students and teachers have different email suffixes. So this basically goes out, finds everybody with an @CBSD, pulls them in, and then changes all their different policy pieces. So that's if this is something you're looking to do, this is a PowerShell script that you can take and run in your own environment. Okay, so those were the pieces that I wanted to share. Those of you that use that Microsoft Educator community, you can redeem a code from our time for points. but I wanted to leave the rest of the time open for questions, either about deploying teams, managing teams, teams in general if you're not familiar with the product.
For your building teams, for each building, what kind of team did you choose? Like a PLC team?
Oh,
or
great. We use a staff team.
a staff team?
I was in a session that, some of your co-workers presented yesterday, and they said that you guys have limited, how many people can create teams within your district. We're kind of running into that problem now where I've got 20 different teams that I'm part of, so it's just constantly.
Yeah, that's why we did that.
Do you have any like protocols for what would be a team versus what would be a channel? Like, is it a generalization?
Yeah. So really, and I have a document that I can send you that I gave to our help desk folks just to try to help them lead that conversation, because typically those tickets come in and then they would come to me to kind of make that final determination and to actually make the team and deliver the training. But really, we look at subset of users. So if a group reaches out that would like a team, one, if it's less than 5 people, the answer is no. You can set that up within a chat within Teams, and you still have file sharing within chat and all of that. I had a group of 3 teachers that wanted a team for just them to collaborate. Like you can, and I showed them in chat, and they were very happy. You know, you can have your persistent chat, you can add documents to that, and that's really all you need. From there, we look at subset of users. So if those users that want a team already exist in a larger team, well, then that to me is a channel, right? Because you are already together somewhere else, you know, and that, because of the way people deployed OneNotes, that was a little bit difficult to get them to understand, especially at kind of our upper admin level. We had some like, well, we're doing the budget for 1819. We need a team for that. Like, well, hold on. Slow down. All of your secondary principals are already all together, so let's make that budget piece part of that secondary administrator team instead of a whole other team that people have to switch between. Yeah, but that was one of the first things we did, was pull away that group creation permission, because we had it limited in Exchange, but then you could still go out and make a planner, and a planner would make a team, a group on the back end. So we had to do some other PowerShell to get those permissions stripped away. So to handle that, we basically took group creation to off for the entire tenant, and then made a group where it flipped that to on, and then there's just 4 people in that security group that have group creation permissions. And that's really helped. Great, any other questions?
How about training for teachers? How well did they think through it, accessing all of that?
For teachers?
Yeah.
Really well, because we started, we did a multi-phase plan to kind of move through this digital transformation. So we did OneDrives first, made everybody get off their individual share drives and go to OneDrive. And then we moved teacher collaboration from network drives to Teams. And then the last piece was moving student collaboration to Teams. So because they saw it kind of in phases and used it on their own first before using it with kids, they were a lot more open to it. So one of the pieces we had to kind of talk them out of, because people wanted to use that sync feature to pull all the team files down to File Explorer. That took the most amount of time to encourage people to not do that. And the biggest piece for me is that people just didn't understand it. Right? You're introducing these sync issues, so now you're looking at like server timestamps and stuff of what overwrites what, or people saying, I don't need this folder anymore, so I don't need to see it, so they delete it, not realizing that they just triggered a delete for everybody. Which was actually kind of nice when that happened, because then I was able to tell the building principal, like, well, this is one of the reasons I told you not to sync, and maybe don't do that anymore. But we had a pretty aggressive campaign. We had two teachers per building that were on our digital transformation committee, so they would go back with presentations and documentation to kind of work with their building. Great, well, I'm available if you have any questions the remainder of the time, and thanks for coming. I hope you learned something.
Anybody that has Office 365 has access to this training community?
Oh yeah, Microsoft.com/education. Yeah, it's really great. There's classes on everything that they offer, little webinars.
Do you do supervision, like, within your teams? Like, if you have a principal or an assistant principal who wants to, discuss an observation with a teacher, and would you utilize teams for that kind of communication, or is that, like, 'cause now we're talking now, we're envisioning, like, if you oversee 15, 20 teachers, and you've got 15, 20 channels, private channels to kind of communicate.
Yeah, no, the way that they let a lot of our administrators will use the OneNote for that, because then every teacher will get that student section
Like a lot
in
of
that OneNote, and then they'll be able to go in and do some of that observation piece there. It allowed us to put OneNote back to where it should be, which is for collaboration, instead of this catch-all behemoth that it kind of became.
Yeah, our school is moving from Google to Microsoft next year.
Okay.
But there's not like listening to it, and they're like, oh, we have a 5-year plan, and we're like, oh, we have an off date, it's like a 5-month plan.
Yeah.
We have August 1st, it's gone.
You're like, buckle up, friends.
Yes, and so, they're migrating everything over, like right now everybody is in a Google Drive, so they're migrating everything over for the teachers. But it's like August 1st, Google's done, yep, you can they're being migrated automatically into one. You can't add them, you can't edit them, you can't, so it's like, of course, the teachers are now like, you're taking away my Google, and it's as, I'm the coach, she's an AD, we're trying to like, how do we support this? We're a virtual school, which makes it even worse, because everything you do is online.
Yeah, I would tell them office.com, like instead, like you were used to going to docs.google.com, go to office.com instead, and then here's your Word, PowerPoint, it's all there.
This year we have it, but no one uses it, because everybody goes to Google. So, we're trying to dabble in it and trying to conceptualize, but it's funny hearing you look at it, we have a 5-year plan, and we're like,
Well, the move to Teams we really did in more of a year and a half. So when they say 5-year plan, they're kind of talking this whole vision of like our one-to-one, and then this was a piece of it. Yeah, but Teams we really did more. I mean, we were pretty aggressive with it because of the way it was going to affect. Like we knew we wanted to manage the one-to-one through Intune. We didn't want to manage them any other way. So we had to get to, the end goal was to how do we change the teacher and student collaboration, because the network drives are going to go away. And we can't have their interaction with students be the first time that happens, because then there's going to be this panic, right? I have to do this with kids and I don't know how it works. So we kind of went backwards from there. It's like, oh, let's have their own stuff, then they're building stuff, and then, the part that has the most high stakes is really that work with kids.
So I'm thinking I'm gonna have this guy with my board members, my business manager and superintendent first, to sort of get that passed. And I think so, like my board members and stuff, they would be considered a channel, correct? Or would that be a team?
Depends on how you want to set it up.
So what I'm thinking is, say you have board member, superintendent, business member, and then there's committees and things within that, where they make it broken out into different steps. So you want that collaboration portal for them all. So if you have your committees working, how would that break down and structure out?
Yeah, so I would just think through like who do you want to allow access to what, right? Because unless you're going to do it where then you have a bunch of private channels, which can be difficult to manage, anybody in that group is going to have access to anything. So we do have a team for our cabinet members, so for our superintendent, assistant superintendent, business manager, tech supervisor, like all of, there's like 6 people. And then there's a channel for each one of kind of their realm. That way they can kind of hop back and forth as they're working on different things, because you'll need input from each different department as you're working on your pieces. So you definitely could do it that way, where like if everybody that's in that group, it's okay for them to have access to all the other committee information, then yeah, I would put them in one and I would separate it that way. But if they're supposed to be a little more siloed, then they could be a team.
Well, I say, committee may work together, it wouldn't matter if go and see it, but you may not necessarily want to see it unless they go into that course.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of that, like, natural cross-pollination.
Yeah.
We're like, all right, well, you know, like, there were some discussions around, well, do we make the grade level channels private for just those teachers? I'm like, you could. One, it's a lot of management. Who wants to do that? And two, if you're showing something at a staff meeting, I'm like, wow, third grade really has a great reading rubric for independent reading, and I would love to move that up and use it in fourth. Why shouldn't I be able to just kind of go and grab it without talking to anybody? Yeah, and the use case in the classroom is, yeah, we use the Microsoft School Data Sync piece. And that was really how we started to sell it, because
that's my selling point.
because they handmade their OneNotes, right? Teachers were hand entering every kid's name, and when you teach secondary and you have 150 kids, that's a lot. So we were kind of like, well, you know, if you go into Teams and push the button, it's gonna pull them all in and you're done. Like, oh, all right. And, you know, like, well, now that you're in Teams, let's check out what what assignments look like, because that is so rich. Like, its use case in, like, this was more for the grown-ups to work together, but its use case in the classroom with kids is really, really good.
That's what I want. I haven't really even looked at that yet, but.
The assignment piece is a game changer, because one, any form that you've already made can already come up as a self-graded quiz without it being made in Teams. So everything you've already done in forms, you have access to. And then once you make an assignment and once you make a rubric, you have access to that across years and across grades. So if I'm making this assignment, I do it every year, well, I just attach the rubric, I can change the wording if I need to tweak it, and then push, here's my assignment. And then I can, in progress, click on any kid's name, and it puts me into an editing view of their work in progress. So I can leave them a comment, like, paragraph 2, change this, and then all that feedback is there.
We use Google Classroom now, and a lot of it is there, but I'm just trying to absorb it. I love Teams and OneNote, but I just don't know how to get my teachers away from Google Classroom after I spent 3 years getting the rest.
Yeah, I mean, and where I think we've struggled a little bit too is we have Canvas at secondary, and we're also using Seesaw at elementary. So it's like, well, where does this all fit in? So I think it's thinking about, like, all right, what's the use case where you would use this instead of this? Like, where's the additional value? You know, like, we have secondary teachers that love OneNote and just want to use OneNote. I'm like, well, that's great, but if you use this assignment feature in Teams, here's what you would get, right? Like, or in elementary, like, you're using Seesaw to put up basically like bulletin board stuff for the teachers to see. But if you want to do an actual graded assignment that one day will pass over here to our student information system, here's where you want to do it, and here's why. You know, so to me, it's always been about, like, building the value. Like, here's what you're going to get out of it. Here's how it's going to free you up to, instead of hand grading these pieces, you can think about, how do I differentiate for that kid? Because that's really where teachers should be using the brain power. You know, not like wrong. You know.
Can you make coworkers on OneNote? Like, we're saying, like, if she and another AP wanted to share OneNote, but, like, have it locked down as a supervisor, could I, like, add those and then they can see without having to have
Because I'm an assistant principal, I wanted my my boss.
Oh yeah.
To be able to see everything I'm doing.
Yep. Yeah, so if you were going to, the easiest way to do it, like if you weren't going to deploy teams, right, you were just going to do a OneNote that you wanted to do for your building, you would do a staff notebook, so that each staff member got their own individual section, and you would just add them as a co-owner. You would just go to class notebook management, click add teacher, and then you just put their email in.
Where do you recommend us going for, like, the support, like office support? Like, where's the best place to go to learn all these things?
That training site that I had up is excellent, and it even has it broken down from, like, beginner, intermediate, advanced, in terms of, like, how much do you already know about this product. They also have a really great, if you're just getting started with Office, they have a really great YouTube series. I think it's called View 10 in 90 seconds, and it's 90-second quick videos about, here's how you make a self-graded quiz in Forms. here's how you do X in Minecraft, and they're just a minute and a half of really quick and simple tricks.
I've been using Teams, I've been using a class team to run induction, I run our induction program, and we hire like 100 teachers a year.
Oh, wow.
So right now I've got like 15 different teachers in it as students, and it's pretty easy, you know, like I've been in the office before, I have a problem with assignments, it's very clunky. Like
Okay.
there's a lot of things, there's a lot of functionality that I feel like coming from Google, it's simplistic, which is why everybody loves it, like, it backs out, it's got a low, you know, point. Which is why it's great, I mean, sky's the limit, but it's just not simple, it's not seamless, if there's things I can do in the desktop version that I can't do in the app, there's things I can do in the app that I can't do, so I'm like, I literally have one of the screen.
Yeah. Well, they continue to have these like really almost like philosophical conversations within Microsoft about like, because eventually the apps are going to start to more and more go away. Like it's easier to program for online, people want to work online, and offering feature parity is really difficult. So even like I almost like wish this was off, this is like even like their resources is going online first. Where they'll do feature parity and all new features are going to go online first. It's just where people want to be. So I would expect to see the same thing happen in Teams where they'll hit feature parity and new stuff will come to them.
Yeah, I think much prefer like doing Outlook.
Use Outlook and web now. Yeah, all the new features come to the Outlook on the web first.
Yeah, that's the only part that I have right now, is that like the assignments are not seamless.
Well, what's interesting, I think what they try to do in assignments is by allowing you to attach any resource you want, you can really make it as elaborate as you want to. Another piece that you could look at is where you can have the apps at the top of the team. You can pull in all kinds of different pieces. You can pull Flipgrid right into it, you can pull whiteboard right into it. So there's a lot of ways that you can pull outside. Like they handle their outside a little bit differently. To me, it's not. Like I teach a college course through Canvas, and for me that's much easier to do asynchronously, like without people like running. But if I was teaching like in person, I would do a combination of teams.
And I'm sure, I know it's just, you know, that's probably the one issue that I'm having right now. But so far, everything else it seems like teachers really like it. We haven't used Skype, so we haven't really used the chat features within. We're watching, I was with Lisa and Brian through that yesterday. It was really interesting to see that you guys do, like we use Zoom for our lessons. It's like, it's not necessary.
At all. I talked to your admin person in your Skype for Business admin center. They can just toggle a switch that says coexistence mode where you can use Skype and Teams at the same time. Because it's one of the steps. They're using Sunset and Skype pretty shortly.
That's what we're all aware of. It's already like. We don't have it turned off for students, so like students can't do anything in Teams, we don't, that's turned off for us right now. So I'm getting, that's why I'm getting production, my students. But,
well, these settings that I had really ease a lot of anxiety that people had around students having access to things. It was, we can't have them doing, X, Y, and Z. Because what they can do is they can participate in a meeting that happens inside a channel. So if a teacher wants to have a meeting on their off hours for a study session, or you can use it for students with low vision, low hearing, to be able to screen hear or sound hear what's happening in the classroom. As long as that meeting is happening in a channel where a student has access, they can join that meeting. But any other meetings, like a meeting on the fly or a meeting that isn't connected to anything, they can't join it. So that makes it where the teacher has to set the meeting up so you're aware that it's happening. The teacher has access to it. There's a record in the chat or in the team that this meeting took place and who was in it. Yeah, and it's all fine.
Not much, I shouldn't say a lot. It's just the same for our LMS. They're not equipped to use it. So.
Well, what you can look at too, you don't even have to do a Teams meeting for that. Teams does a live broadcast where the other people can't they can't talk or listen to video, it's just for them to see what you're doing. It built an automatic 10-second delay, where you're like a little off because you're 10 seconds in the future for your attendees. I'm not sure why they do that. But that if you're having that many users, that's something to look at. But then you don't have to. It preserves all the bandwidth for you. You know, because they're just getting a view on the other end. You still get a back channel where they can ask questions and view things, which is kind of, in that case, it's kind of nice with a 10-second delay because you're kind of like moving on, and then you see the question. It's going to keep playing for 10 seconds while you kind of formulate like what's happening, and then you can jump into the response.
Yeah, I just had to play around. Certification for
Oh, the MIAE? Yeah, so they... Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, so what you'll want to do is go on that Microsoft education site, and you can get just a Microsoft Innovative Educator. Is just by doing a certain number of classes and doing things to kind of show like, yeah, I know what I'm doing. And then in April of every year, they have where you apply to be that MIE expert piece. And then what that does once you're in there is you are in a group, a closed group of MIE experts from across the country that then have monthly calls. You're in a team with all of them, and you're just able to bounce ideas, get information. Hey, I'm trying to do this. Does anybody have documentation about how you do this? I couldn't remember to generate the code, like what the website was. I put it out like, hey, because they just moved it over the summer. Like, what's the new training code? Within like 4 seconds, somebody gave me the URL for it. So it's a really, I think this is my 4th or 5th year in the group, and it's really beneficial. Yeah, I can't say enough to.
Yeah, I mean, it's, we are going to Microsoft with security, since obviously everything is online, so they're really messed over, but there's just, I don't think there's a full plan for how they're supporting teachers. I don't think
Well, that's been so great about, like, if you saw our presentation yesterday, or we had another one that ran today, our tech director came in the classroom, who was a classroom teacher for a long time, our supervisor of technology came in the classroom, and I came in the classroom.
Yeah.
So whenever we sit down, we kind of think like, all right, what's the rollout plan? How should these settings be? It's all, classroom first. Like, all right, well, in the classroom, we might want to do X, Y, and Z. So let's make sure all of this supports X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, and our concern is that just because you're an online teacher doesn't mean you're tech savvy. So our fear is when they switch people off of Microsoft on, you're gonna have a lot of people who are like, I don't even know how to share an online program. Where's the button? Where's that blue button that Google has? And we're like, the nice thing about Google is, and it looks the same everywhere. All the platforms, the entire platform, everything's the same. Whereas Microsoft, there's different things, different nuances. So that's our concern. It's kind of like, we really need to start carrying staff because we're not even fully.
Yeah, I would definitely give them that office.com, because that I think is going to give them a certain sense of comfort. Where like, I went through this before and it's the same. And then even give them a 1-for-1. Like, you had Docs, you have Word. Like, in all these you can write online, they're the same. And then I would also talk to your tech department about what the default share length is going to be, because that will simplify it for your teachers. And if for security reasons they want it to be X, and the way you need teachers to do it would be Y, then just make that documentation of, like, this is what you're going to see, and then to change it to what we want, hit these buttons. Because that you have a lot of flexibility as an admin in the back end with what that default share length is like. Like when you hit share, what does it default to? So I would just talk to your tech department, whoever your Office 365 admin is.
Within our domain. Yeah.
How are they setting that on the back end?
Yeah, because right now it's set only users within our domain can view.
My biggest thing is I'm thinking like, they're going to say, we've just spent 3 years figuring out Google and now we're.
So that's what our teachers, that's why are you taking Google away from us?
Like, it is easier for them to use it. Because we would Chromebook.
I used to run a workshop that I called So I Hear You Like Google Docs for a couple of our buildings that kind of had that same whatever. And the way I kind of explained that piece was like, so you have Google Docs, right? But then that's all that you have, right? You know what it can do online, and that's it. In the Microsoft environment, it's also all online. You can go, you can do 90% of your work online. And then if you need to do something that's a little bit more resource intensive, like, I mean, I don't know that a pivot table is necessarily more resource intensive, but I want to do a screen recording. I want to do something that I can't even do in a Google document, I can't do in Microsoft Online. I can hit a button and it will open the full product, and now I have a whole slew of tools that I didn't have previously. So that's how I try to kind of sell that value of like, yeah, it can be as simple as go online and do it. But if there's something else you need, you have that backup that you can do.
Yeah, we just have to clarify the whole like open in browser thing, like they just, we need full trainings here.
Well, it's funny, because I've had the problem almost from the opposite, like I wanted to go web first, because that's the only guidance from Microsoft, like a web document is a happy document.
Yes.
But they're so accustomed to, well, I make a PowerPoint, so I double click the PowerPoint, and now, let me start building, and then they call, they're like, this isn't like syncing, I'm like, well, did you start online? I'm like, well, no, I'm like, well, that's.
It is, and it's funny because you use Word docs for as long as you can, like, that's the
Yeah.
original word processing, but I always double click, it's shortcut in my search tabs, like, go to Word, open it up. So I still have it, but I go to docs.com,
Yeah, that's why I keep saying that office.com.
like, but I have a default.
I just
Yeah.
live in Drive. When I get to my computer, I open my browser and I go to Google Drive. And then anytime I wanna create something, I just click the new button, like I don't use the apps,
Yeah.
It's just
And you can do the same in OneDrive.
And so when I sit with the teacher and they're like, okay, make a new job. And they're like going, I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, what? But they just haven't had a like place that like, for me it was, I just learned it in Drive, so that's where I live, and someone,
Well, it'll get
they
easier.
live on their desktop, they wanna use File Explorer, they wanna, and I'm like,
Yeah, as more and more stuff is web first, right? Like the new features of Outlook or in Outlook Online. Pear Deck only works with PowerPoint Online. So as more and more of this stuff works web first, it's, you know, eventually it'll be, well, you have to go there. You don't have a choice.
And we're getting the computers that have Office 19 on it. I've never seen Office 19. Since I have Office 16 on my 5-year-old.
It's not that different.
No, it's not. So I was wondering if it would make it easier. But
Yeah, I would just,
probably not.
I would just tell them like, look, you used to go to docs.google.com and instead you're gonna go to office.com.
Yeah.
It's the same, this one equals this one, it's the same
Right,
thing. You used to go to drive.google.com, OneDrive.microsoft.com.
Right.
It's the same, like, here's my one for one, right? If you'd like to start here, you're just gonna start here instead. Instead of hitting new, you're gonna hit new.
Right.
Instead of picking doc, you're gonna pick Word, like, you know.
Yeah, my next step was to create a professional development environment. And I was talking with the principals about creating it in Google Classroom, but then the fear is that then it's student versus teacher in classrooms as the themes, we don't have that like student feel, teacher feel kind of issues, that hopefully that would feel better for them as opposed to
Yes.
student in this classroom, like, you know.
I mean, I would probably step up a class team so you can give them assignments.
Right.
But and Brian Novak, who did the presentation on Teams yesterday, has one for step development that he uses. I'm sure he'd be happy to share with you what, you know, how he runs that.
Yeah, that's what I do for induction, and it's actually worked really well. Like all the teachers are just in the students, so like I push out modules to them every month. They turn it in. I'm not finishing as much, or I'm not doing it like the easiest of ways, but it's worked really well for induction.
Yeah, but I know that class is gonna be, I wasn't trained in this. I feel like the first like 3 months of school.
Well, then you get the opposite too, right? But I was trained to do it this way. Like, yeah, you were 5 years ago, you know.
Well, that's what, and they